right at the perfect or very imperfect moment, he turned his head to look at the accident and crossed right in front of me, and he hit me head on. In a triathlon bike, you're almost bent over at the waist at 90 degrees, and so your hands and your head are kind of out in front, and that's where I got hit. The force of that reverberated down my spine and broke 3 of my vertebrae, compression fractures in my vertebrae.
Welcome to Stories of Hope in Hard Times, the show that explores how people endure and even thrive in difficult times, all with God's help. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson. Join me on a journey to find inspiring stories of hope and wisdom learned in life's hardest moments. My next guest has lived in Virginia, California, Honduras, and Utah. He was a Division I collegiate track and field athlete in pole vaulting who was fortunate enough to win conference championships and competed in the NCAA finals, where he appeared in the top 50 in the pole vault for the world rankings in the 2000 Olympic year. Once he retired from pole vaulting, he began to explore the world of triathlon and endurance sports, and he's been hooked ever since, having competed in over 200 competitive endurance events. He even qualified for the Boston Marathon and became an All-World Ironman triathlete. After receiving his undergraduate in psychology and getting his MBA, he had a 13-year career in corporate sales. About 8 years ago, he left sales to pursue his passion of working in the world of health and fitness. He is the owner and operator of TriFit Evolution, a small strength coaching and endurance coaching and personal training business located in Arlington, Virginia. His goal is to help others achieve their fitness goals. He married his sweetheart, Laura Dawn, 2.5 years ago, and they have been blessed with a beautiful son. I am pleased to introduce Alan Gulledge. Alan, are you ready to share your story of hope?
Sure thing.
Awesome. Well, Alan and I actually have a long history of being friends. We grew up together in Northern Virginia, and I actually have many fond memories of playing in your backyard and in your basement as kids.
Yes.
I was thinking about that this morning, and I thought, I remember, I don't know what we were doing, but it was you, me, and Kevin, and we were fighting off some imaginary foe with pretend guns and I don't know what, but we were having a great time.
That sounds about right. Yes. And I know my sisters were always jealous because you'd play with me and my twin brother. Instead of playing like dolls or whatever, we would go off gallivanting around the backyard. And
we did. We had so much fun.
Doing all sorts of tomboyish, boyish things. And yeah, that was a good time.
Oh, man. So Alan and I go way back. We're kind of more like cousins than we are friends because we grew up that way, didn't we?
Yeah, we still call your parents Uncle Jim and Aunt Karen. So,
I know, right? So good times. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about your story today and talk to me a little bit about all this competitive sports, because this is an area where that has not been my area of strength, I guess I should say. I running is not my favorite thing. I enjoy walking for exercise. So when you talk about you being like a World Ironman triathlete, which I understand is the top 5% division worldwide, talk to me about what it takes to get to that kind of level.
Well, you know me, I could never sit still as a kid, and I was always wanting to be running outside and doing whatever. And I became a pole vaulter in high school. In fact, I moved to Utah And to make friends, I joined the track team, and I was the worst one of the entire team at the pole vault. I was really bad. And being competitive, I just started practicing, and I would drag my twin brother down to the track on Saturday mornings to help me get better. And so I just, little by little, I've never really been a naturally gifted athlete, but I just always applied myself and worked hard in that area. And so that's really kind of what it takes, I think, as I just worked hard, and I've had some great mentors and people around me who have helped me be successful collegiately. Being a pole vaulter was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed the work. In the pole vault, there's lots of different things that you have to do to actually, you don't just go out and pole vault every day. In fact, most of the time is not doing that. Most of the time is working on your running, working in the weight room, becoming strong, working on your jumping technique, working on doing plyometrics, running up the stadiums, doing work in the gymnastics room to work on your aerial awareness and body awareness in space, and all these kind of things. But I really loved that process. And then so as I retired from that, in my mid-20s, that sounds funny to say I retired in my 20s from my mid-20s from the pole vault, which is much higher impact than what I do now. I moved to California and fell into some good friendships with some people that introduced me to triathlon. So once again, I was really bad when I first started. I could barely swim across the 25-meter pool, and that was gasping and doing a horrible compilation of breaststroke and backstroke and side stroke, anything I could. And, in my first race, I was horrible. And I remember I was 26 years old. I had tried to qualify for the Olympics the year before in the pole vault. So I was very good at what I thought was, something that was super difficult. And I thought, this isn't hard to do. Ride a bike, swim, and I remember riding my bike during the first triathlon that I ever did, and the women in their 50s just flying past me. And I remember in triathlon, they mark the back of your leg with your age, so that, as you're competing on the course, because you're divided up in anywhere from 5 to 10 year segments for your age division. And so to identify what division you're on, the back of your calf actually is literally stamped with your age. And I remember seeing, to this day, the women with number 50, 52, 51, 50, 49, and here I was what I thought was this young, strapping collegiate athlete, and I just got my doors blown off. And I just thought, man, no. And I was not gifted. And so I just worked really hard. And luckily, I've been very fortunate to have the time and the energy to be able to do that, and the means to be able to kind of just pursue that. And over time, I got a little bit better and a little bit better. And I was able to kind of parlay that into a business. And so now I actually help other people to do that. No real overly athletic super gene or anything that I had, but I just worked hard. I was willing to put in the work, but I love the process of becoming a triathlete, as well as I love the process of becoming a pole vaulter. And I think in life, that's a good lesson to learn, is that you just work on the process, and you become, in the end, you become something that you never imagined that you'd become, but it's just working on the process. And I loved that.
That's amazing. It's amazing to me that you're able to take something that you weren't good at and just push and work and work and work and work until you became an expert in this field. And that's really unbelievable, to the point now where you coach others, and that's unbelievable. And you're right, it does take a lot of work to do anything well. You have another unique aspect to your story in that you had an accident happen along the way that set you back and probably gave you a totally different perspective to the physical body and recovering from trauma, I guess we would say. So would you mind telling us a little bit about that accident and your recovery from it?
Yeah, it was 2015 in the fall, and it was September, and I was about 2 weeks out from competing in Ironman Maryland, which is a local Ironman triathlon, which involves swimming 2.4 miles, riding 112 miles, and then running a full marathon, which is 26.2 miles.
Wow.
And it wasn't the first time I'd done it. I'd done it before, and I've done several since, but I was excited. I had been training really hard. My training was coming along. I was kind of poised to do very well, at least what I thought. And I don't mean professionally really well, but just as an amateur, I was poised to do well in my division. And so I was just going out for an easy hour-long bike ride as opposed to like a 4, 5, 6 hour bike ride. Just very short. It was just to go ride around a park that's about a 3-mile loop that you go around. You rode around it, half a dozen times, come back home. And I was out and I was riding across a bridge that there's a bike path alongside a major highway. And there was another cyclist coming towards me who was distracted by there was a car accident, a little fender bender on the road, and he was somewhat distracted. And right at the perfect or very imperfect moment, he turned his head to look at the accident and crossed right in front of me, and he hit me head on, and I didn't even literally see him coming. It just,
wow.
Everything was like all went black, and I had this huge impact. And essentially it hit me right on my head, hit my head in my hands, because my head was forward. In a triathlon bike, you're almost bent over at the waist at 90 degrees. And so your hands and your head are kind of out in front, and that's where I got hit. And so the force of that reverberated down my spine and broke 3 of my vertebrae, compression fractures in my vertebrae. And then I ended up breaking the first rib, which is a rib that's higher up in your body. And then I ended up breaking some bones in my neck, and did extensive damage to my left knee and my left hand. And so it kind of, hit me, and I fell off the bike, of course, and went down to the ground and ended up, in the ER, and stayed in the hospital for about 4 days, and ended up in rehab for about 4 months, and then ended up having knee surgery later as a result of it, about 6 months later after that, and then had another 4 or 5 months of rehab after that. And so it took me, it knocked me out for about 1.5 years of actually running and cycling and swimming the way I had been accustomed to. So it was a challenge. And I just started my own personal fitness company. And so my business, my livelihood relied on me being able to physically move and work with clients and run with clients and do the things that I needed to do. So it set me back quite a bit, both professionally and athletically. But I was very fortunate that I had some wonderful people around me, both in the medical field and then also just people in my world, that were a very robust church community that just rallied behind me and helped me out. It was a long road for me to get back to full health. But I've been very blessed as a result. I'm faster now than I was then in my,
really,
because I've raced since, and so I'm better and faster and stronger now than I was then, which is pretty remarkable. So
that is remarkable.
Again, it just, so that had a happy ending, that story for the most part, but certainly it was a process.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So you talk a lot about taking time, obviously, to recover. This was not something you just bounced back from. It took probably over 1 year to even get moving really well again. Talk to me about some of the lessons perhaps you learned in that year of recovering from the accident.
I think probably one of the big lessons I learned, there's many, but I would say is just being patient. And I think all of us work, especially here on the East Coast, everything's fast paced and everybody's has their agenda and things they need to do. And, the time frame is now and yesterday. And I think it taught me to slow down, be patient, work through the process. And in doing so, it made me realize and appreciate the things that I had taken for granted, like being able to move. Here I was as a competitive athlete saying, gosh, I I need to get my marathon time down, several more minutes, or my bike power needs to be higher, or my swim stroke needs to be smoother, or I'm worried about these things. And some people can't walk,
Mm-hmm.
and some people, just to be able to move without pain was a blessing for me,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately being able to run pain-free. I remember running for several months thinking, gosh, am I ever going to run without feeling this pain in my knee and my back? And so it taught me to be thankful and grateful for those blessings that we take for granted on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor, when I went in for one of my post-op visits and took x-rays and made sure that everything was healing correctly, and he said, he goes, you're very, very lucky. If your head was not perfectly in line with your spine when this happened, your head was moved just a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, just by a millimeter or two, he said, this would be a very different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning I'd be either in a wheelchair or worse. Even now, as I'm now still fairly competitive athlete myself in the amateur ranks and helping other people, we're always talking about, getting these times down. In reality, I just need to step back and be grateful that I can walk and move and breathe on my own. And so it taught me to be grateful and to be patient with myself as I kind of recovered. I have a pretty strong faith. And so, relying on my faith and being able to turn to God and ask for patience and faith and sustaining support, and those aspects that we all fall short on from time to time.
Oh,
That was
absolutely.
helpful,
Yeah.
and I think just being able to be still and to be able to be quiet and just take a minute and be grateful for what you have, and I remember one time specifically, so many wonderful people around you, and Tamara, this, when you do have tragedy strike, and I'm sure some of your listeners will agree, it seems like the silver lining of the cloud sometimes is that people that come to your aid that you had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people reaching out to me that I had known from high school 30 years ago. And people just rallied around me and I remember taking time and saying a prayer of gratitude one time for so many wonderful people that were so helpful for me in my time of need.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some things I really kind of thought about as, when I was kind of going through things, and just taking that time to be grateful for what we do have and what the people around us and, our faith and the things that kind of sustain us.
I have found the same thing to be true, especially at different points in my life when we've needed help. And it is a blessing to have people serve you, especially if you've always been the one giving the service. To have that returned, it was like I was given an increased capacity to love these people. And I never realized that the person receiving service could have that blessing of feeling love for so many people. And so I think that's one of the things I learned, that not only do the people who serve learn to love that person they're serving, but the opposite is also true. You receiving the service learn to love those people even more. So I totally agree. Let me ask you this. Was there ever a time in your recovery where you were feeling down and discouraged and asked God why? Why did this happen?
That's a good question. I don't remember necessarily asking God why during prayer, but I remember certainly thinking that, trying to look for meaning in that. And I think sometimes we look for meaning in tragedy. And I think you can find meaning, but then I think it's also okay to realize that we don't have to necessarily have a reason for everything. I think we have that tendency to, this is going to be a blessing to you. And and that's not what people want to hear usually in the moment.
No.
And yet we sometimes, I can look back now, obviously hindsight, it really is 2020. And I look back and I'm like, gosh, would never wish somebody to go through that. I don't want to go through it again, but I'm certainly glad that I did, because I see the blessings of it. That being said, I'd be just fine to not have to do that, and, I'd be okay. But I think sometimes we kind of can try to identify a reason. And in reality, sometimes just terrible things happen and it's just horrible. And whether it's a trauma or an illness or somebody passes way too soon. A quick aside, and there was 5 friends of ours that were high school, and they had all come back from doing some missionary service for our church overseas for a couple of years. And all of them were coming back from a camping trip, and the driver of the car fell asleep at the wheel, and he rolled the car, and 3 of the boys died. And they're early 20s. And you think, oh my gosh, here are these 3 boys who, gave some of the best years of their growing up, to church service for a couple of years, and they were serving God, and they were doing all these things, and they died. Oh my gosh. And I remember one of our church leaders came and talked to the congregation at the funerals, and I thought he was going to give the rah-rah speech of, oh, there's a reason, and have faith, and this is God's will, and that was not the topic of his message. He just said, sometimes we don't know why. We just don't know why, and it's okay to question. It's okay to say why, and it's okay to not have the answer. And I remember that, and that was a man named Jeffrey Holland, and I still remember that. And so I think about that sometimes when we look and say, why me, or why him or her, or what's the reason here? And sometimes, gosh, it's hard, because we want to say, well, this is the reason, and sometimes we don't. There's not a reason. There's just terrible things that happen. That's part of living in an imperfect world, I think, and sometimes a result of others' choices and so forth. But I think as we go through that process of whether it's grief or rehabilitation physically or rehabilitation emotionally or whatever that is, I think we do come back stronger. If we do the work that we need to do, whether it's spiritual work, physical work, emotional work on forgiving, work on, literally strengthening a limb or a joint like I had to do, we come back stronger. But being able to say, I'm going to take this one day at a time. I'm just going to worry about stepping one foot in front of the other, and keeping, some focus and some perspective, and being grateful for what I have now. And
I've kind of come to the same conclusion that we may not always know the reason why, but I think God can take whatever adversity we face in our life, and he can help us become stronger because of it. Stronger, better. And like you said, that's probably not what we want to hear when we're going through it. When you're so exhausted and worn out and down, it's hard to imagine life being any different. But I guess that's where faith comes in, right? Belief that God can see perhaps something down the road that we can't, and that he'll help us become someone who is maybe more patient, stronger, better inside than we used to be. And it's hard. It's a hard process. And it's interesting. I liked how you tied in also how it's not just the physical challenges that we face, and we can grow physically, but there's that emotional component as well, the soul. And so I think learning to balance both the physical and the emotional, intellectual growth as well. And it sounds like you were able to do that. So that's amazing. We're going to take a quick break. But when we get back, Alan, would you mind sharing with us the secrets of setting achievable goals and maybe some of the mindset that goes with that, along with resources that you would recommend for others who are struggling?
Sure.
How many of you out there feel like your life is chaotic, crazy, and completely awful compared to the norm? What if I were to tell you that you are normal for you? I am so excited to announce that my book, Normal for Me by Tamara K. Anderson, is now available for purchase on Amazon. This book took me 10 years to write, and I share 20 years worth of lessons learned in my life detours, including being in a car accident and having 2 of my children diagnosed on the autism spectrum. In this book, I share the secrets of how I made it from despair to peace with God's help. I also include a bonus diagnosis survival guide at the very end of my Normal for Me book. The Diagnosis Survival Guide includes 12 tips to survive and thrive in tough times. Wouldn't you like to know what those are? So what are you waiting for? Grab your copy of Normal for Me today on Amazon. And we're back. I'm talking to Alan Gulledge about his recovery from a life-changing bike accident and the lessons he learned during that. He's talked about the importance of having patience with yourself and perseverance, keeping going, having trust in God. Over the break, Alan and I were talking about how he also learned some lessons in humility. Alan, would you mind talking to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I, like many people, fiercely independent, don't like to ask for help very much, and I can do it on my own kind of attitude, which is good. We all want to be self-reliant, but I think these types of situations kind of force us to humble ourselves a little bit. And in this particular instance, I had to physically humble myself and allow people to do things that I couldn't do for myself. You know, when you recover from a back injury, especially one of this particular type, you are on your back for quite an extended period of time, laying down, and you can't do anything for several weeks. I was bedridden, and then it was slowly getting up and moving around the apartment, and then was going outside, and I had to have people help me to do these things that I was, here I was this, athlete, and not able to literally get out of bed and take a shower on my own or go to the bathroom, and have people help me to do that. And that's a very humbling circumstance to find yourself in. And so that was something that just the physical day-to-day things I had to ask for. I had friends that would sleep on my floor in my apartment to help me out in the middle of the night. And you want to say, oh, that's okay, I got it, I'm okay, I'm good. But then when the middle of the night, it's 3 a.m. and your pain medication wears off and you're in excruciating pain and you can't move and you need help. I really had to ask for help. And that's something that I think we don't do enough of. We always hear the virtues of service, which we want to be Christ-like and loving towards others and serve and help. But we also need to provide the opportunity for others to do the same for us. Because when we want to be overly independent, we're withholding those opportunities from other people. And I realized that, that I could, by saying, yes, come over, bring me meals, or come sit with me while I limp my way to the couch and watch Netflix, because that's the only thing I can do, sitting there with me was service, so allowing others to serve us, that's an opportunity for us to help others in a way. And we don't look at it that way. We think of, oh, I don't want to be a drag on somebody. I don't want to be and sure, you can take advantage of that. And we probably know people that do, but that's usually not most people. We want to be self-sufficient on our own. And I learned, it's just a shift in perspective of thinking of, hey, I'm allowing somebody else the opportunity to grow and to learn and to serve. And sure, I'll have my time, but to serve and bless the lives of others. But I think, life is about giving and taking, and we have to be able to take sometimes as well as give. And that balance of life, is super, super helpful. And I think if we don't, we do become a little bit almost prideful and see it as a sign of weakness to have somebody help us. And I think that that's kind of dangerous territory when we start kind of being so rigid and refuse somebody's offer of service. I think that kind of can get into kind of, at least for me, I think in a spiritual space, I think that it can be a little bit corrosive, prideful in a way that's really not helpful. So that was something that, humbling myself and learning. And again, the physical side of having to go through the physical rehab and so forth, and doing things like, running without limping and all those kind of things like that are somewhat humbling, especially when you teach other people to run for a living, can be challenging, Yeah. So I think there's a lot of different ways that I learned kind of humility.
I love that. I really do. Let me ask you this kind of as a follow-up question to what you were just saying. Have you found that you have changed the way you coach people because of the accident?
That's a good question. Gosh, I've never thought about that.
Like, are you more patient and understanding, I guess, because of what you've been through?
Yeah. So I think because I have physical therapists that send me their clients that are kind of post rehab
Mm-hmm.
in learning, running better, for example, learning techniques that will lessen impact on their joints as they run. So many, and this is a total aside, but so many doctors that are well-meaning yet uninformed, people come to them with knee injuries and say, "Oh, I'm a runner," and they just say, "Well, you can't run anymore, or you're too X, Y, or Z to run. You shouldn't run." I appreciate their desire to preserve integrity of joints, but that's really not the case. People can run. They just need to learn to run correctly and to be able to strengthen their bodies in the way that they need to be stable through their core muscles to allow them to run correctly. And then
Mm-hmm.
people can run for quite a long time. But when people come to me, just being a little more patient, I think not just this injury, but I've had a slew of other, athletic related injuries over the years that have kind of contributed to a much more patient approach, if that's what you're asking, like being able
Mm-hmm.
to be a little more understanding, both with people that are coming back from pain that are either unable, meaning they're in pain when they do a certain movement, or they are scared that they will be in pain from a certain movement. And I think that has application to the broader, life lessons, in that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're fearful of literally taking a step forward because we are afraid it will hurt us.
Mm.
And I remember coming back from my rehab, and my physical therapist, who I love and adore, and she's really great, but she had me do a drill where I was literally kind of running and stopping on that leg that was hurt, kind of jumping on this leg while slamming a medicine ball down to force me to trust my foot again, because I had developed a protective overstride in my gait. I was basically ingraining a bad habit in my run because I was subconsciously fearful of pain in my knee because I'd been running with pain as a result of the accident.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, so I'm a little bit more sympathetic to people that are hesitant and cautious in physical activities because of pain they haven't experienced or they fear that they will experience again. And I think obviously we want to heal, but we also have to relearn to not be fearful. And we have to consciously make the decision that, hey, I'm not going to let this fear of, and then fill in the blank, failure, pain, trial, tribulation, adversity, whatever it is, I'm not going to let that fear of that prevent my progress, either spiritually, physically, emotionally, whatever. So in that way, yeah, I have kind of softened my approach a little bit in certain ways with clients, and changed how I kind of coach people, or maybe not changed it, but have evolved towards, over a long period of time in being more sympathetic and more understanding.
That is awesome. Even as I've, like, for example, started podcasting, I remember having to overcome some fears, and it was really hard for me to be able to face those fears. And I found I almost had to focus on something other than the fear. I had to give myself a goal, something that was powerful enough that I wasn't looking at the fear, but I was looking at maybe the end result of that. Do you do the same thing with your clients? Do you have them focus on something other than the fear? And what is that typically?
Absolutely. Yeah. That is a huge, huge, huge focus of mine when I ever talk to clients for the first time, and whether their goals are, and I do have kind of two sides of the house, so to speak, of my business. And one is strength training and personal training, just what you'd see anybody from a normal, just average Joe or Jill off the street that needs to lose 20 pounds or 30 pounds or 100 pounds losing weight, or somebody that needs to get back in shape after a period of time off, or maybe somebody's coming back from an accident or illness like I was. I've had people come back from hip surgery, knee replacements, all sorts of things. And then I also have the very high functioning triathletes and runners who are looking to qualify for Boston or looking to get to the world championships or looking to run. I had a girl run her first 100-mile ultra race just over this past weekend. And so we worked for many, many, many months. And we absolutely, the first thing I asked the question of, what are your goals? And we go through and we refine what those goals are. And then with that goal, then breaking it down and saying, okay, well, what's the process by which you're going to achieve this goal? And then being process oriented throughout the training cycle, whether it's trying to lose weight, especially over the holidays, people struggle with this. And so we talk about, what are some preemptive things we can do as we go into this difficult situation? Like, what are going to be the resources that you have to help you to, not binge eat over Thanksgiving? If you're a 300-pound person that needs to lose 100 pounds, or their doctor is going to put them on, some medications and all sorts of stuff. So what do we do? So we take that approach, absolutely, a very goal-oriented approach. And I remind them of that. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes the goals are things like, I worked with a girl last year who came off major ACL reconstruction, which is about a year-long recovery. And she wanted to run a 5K. She was not a runner, never had been a runner, but she said, hey, my goal to get me to rehab my knee, I want to run a 5K. And I said, okay.
Wow.
And so we did it. And so and then I have people that their goals are different. They are going through fertility treatments because they want to be parents, and they really want to do that. And they are significantly overweight. And so we remind them of those goals, and we talk about, okay, well, what are the challenges? What are the fears? What are the temptations? What are the things? Okay, well, let's focus on the overarching goal is to be, in this place where you can be healthy to possibly conceive. So, but being able to have that goal and having that focus is very critical. I think for me, it was, I want to get back to being a competitive triathlete, and not just competitive triathlete, but very, very good, and to the point of being upper echelon of my little division or whatever. And that kept me going. And so for some people, it's your family and being able to be healthy for your family, or being able to be a better, caregiver or whatever it is. But yeah, we definitely, I think goals are critical as you come back or face some of these challenges that we have.
Oh, and I love how you talked about breaking it down, that we need to break down. So not only have that overarching goal that pulls us forward, but sometimes a big goal seems so unsurmountable that you do need to pause and say, okay, what does that look like on a month-to-month basis? What does that look like for this month, this week, and then what can I do today? So breaking it down to just little tiny bite-sized achievable goals so that it doesn't seem so overwhelming, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe this is where your psychology degree comes into play, Alan.
Kind of, yeah. You become a part-time psychologist, that's for sure.
Oh man, because so much of what we do, and especially our fears that hold us back, it's all in our mind. And so we just have to be able to set that goal and have the faith and have somebody that you're accountable to, like these people that hire you, they're accountable to you and you're going to help them through it. And I found that to be true for me as I have set brave and new goals, like for myself this year in podcasting and writing and publishing a book, that it has really helped me to have somebody that I'm accountable to. And so it's easier when you're not doing it by yourself, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I always tell my weight loss clients that there's 3 keys to people that are very successful at this and those that aren't. And one is they have a firm goal that is fixed, time bound, just like we know what SMART goals are, right? Mm-hmm. Strategic and time bound, and also, specific and everything else. But so they have a goal, they have a process, which for them, that means they're writing down and recording what they eat. Mm-hmm. And that's the process. And then the third pillar is they're accountable. They're accountable to me as their coach or their trainer, and they're accountable to, and I have them be accountable to somebody else. So, okay, you're accountable to me, you're accountable to yourself, you're accountable to who else? Who in your world can support you in this? Whether it's a spouse, a significant other, a partner, a friend, a coworker, whatever, you're going to be accountable to 3 people. And those that do those things, that keep the process, that have the goal and have the accountability, they are successful. And I mean, and that's not rocket science, but you look at other aspects of life. It doesn't have to be in just in losing weight, but it could be in, competing for an event, or it could be in making a goal, like you said, to write a book, and you have a publisher that you're accountable to, and you have maybe an agent, or maybe a spouse that's going to be your, editor or proofreader, whoever it is, So absolutely, I think having that is critical. I think being, in a faith-based world, I include God in this. When I specifically work for very audacious, challenging stretch goals to put myself in, either in business or in my triathlon world, and certainly in my marriage and so forth, and family, but in my business world and in my athletic world, I think sometimes we think, you look at somebody sideways and say, yeah, I really involve the Lord in how I prepare for a race or an event. Well, I think he really is involved in the details of our lives. And I think that, not that he's, the grand puppet master by any means, but I feel like if we can say, hey, Lord, I'm doing the best I can do, and I need your help to fill in the gaps. And you say that, and then you really, at the end of the day, you make an accounting to him of your daily life. And I include that. I remember in recent, this is post-accident, I came off of a marathon recently, and I came off of another Ironman race about 8 weeks ago. And I remember in those preparations saying, hey, I could literally kneel down and say, Lord, I have done my part, and this is what I've done. And literally laying out, saying, did this run, I did this bike, I did this. And I need you to help me out on these things that I can't control, or, help me to be focused in the way I need to be on my nutrition, or on my, how I swim in this particular event. People might laugh that off as like, oh, it's not relevant, it's not important, it's just a race. Yeah, you're right. In the grand scheme of things, I promise it makes zero difference if I came in, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th place, or if I came in 250th in God's eyes. I really don't think it cares. But to me, it's important. And I think the things that are important to me can be important to him. And so I think that's the greatest accountability we have is to him, as well as to people that can give us immediate feedback, who are the people that are close around us and are in our world, and that want the same goals that we want for us, because they see that is a healthy and a positive and a worthwhile process.
I found the same thing to be true for me. And it's interesting, sometimes God does bless us with that focus. And then sometimes he blesses us to meet somebody that will teach us something new or a different way to look at something in our lives. And so sometimes I think God blesses us with the knowledge, and sometimes he blesses us to meet people who will help us along that path. And it's interesting how that happens. And I've kind of seen this theme flowing through this podcast as we've been talking, of our interactions with other people, helping others, serving others, working with others, helping each other with our goals. And I can't help but think that the longer I've been struggling through life, the more I realize that I really don't think God meant for us to come to this world and to do it all on our own. I think he meant for us to learn and grow and work together and help each other along our different journeys. And I think it's amazing that you've been able to see that in your own life, not only as a trainer and as an athlete, but now you're also able to give back, and with such an increased perspective because of your accident and because you had to be a recipient before. And so I think it's beautiful how it all seems to tie together, that we're really all in this together,
Yes. I was just thinking as you were talking about, how we are blessed with the gifts that we need. And sometimes we're blessed to have others that come into our lives to teach us, and I thought about teaching, and I think some of the greatest blessings that I've received in life, and this goes outside the realm of just the accident and so forth and recovery, but I think is the failures that we have. I think so many times those can be faith crushing in the moment. And yet, I'm reminded, we talked about off the mic, we talked about kind of a favorite Bible verse. And I was going to use one of the, like Proverbs 3:5, which is counsel the Lord in all thy doings, he shall direct thy paths. But I also think about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Mm-hmm. And, when they're being thrown into literally burning to death in the furnace. And they said, and by I think it's King Nebuchadnezzar or somebody, to say, hey, you're going to, if you don't bowing down and worshiping me, work the idol or whatever, then you're going to get thrown in the furnace. And they said, you know what? Nope. And they said, well, we know that God can save us, but if not, we will still worship him, or something. I'm paraphrasing and slaughtering the actual verse. But I think about that we all have a but if not moment, and many moments for most of us in life where we fall on our face, or we fail, or the angels don't come and save us, or the tragedy does not avoid us, or we have this struggle and trial and it doesn't go our way. Even though we're righteously pleading for deliverance, we're not delivered. Mm-hmm. Now, in that case, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were, but mm-hmm. they said, hey, but if not, we're still going to worship the true God, And I think that that's helpful in life in reference to our failures and the struggles that we have in these times of trial. It sounds cliche, but they can be stumbling blocks or stepping stones, right? It's keeping that perspective of, okay, this is a stumbling block or a stepping stone. What's going to be for me? Is this going to faith, or is this going to lift my faith?
Oh, this has been so fun. So let me ask you this. What resources would you recommend to people who perhaps are struggling?
Well, I mean, I think there's so many things out there. And especially now with the virtual world we live in, we have access to so many things. It's literally at our fingertips. And I think, first and foremost, any type of scriptures that we read, Word of God, right? Mm-hmm. That's super, super helpful and inspirational. Yet most of us don't have the time or energy or the ability to be able to walk around with our nose in scripture all day long. I try to listen to talks or podcasts or things that help kind of inspire, and not just from a spiritual perspective, but an emotional perspective, a educational perspective, a physical, all these areas. And I'm a big proponent in, obviously professionally, what I do is a more holistic approach towards solving problems. And that includes the physical self. Mm-hmm. That includes self-care. Part of the reason that I even have a job here on the East Coast that I can make a living, in the fitness world, which is hard to do, is that on the East Coast, so many people are so stressed and they are so busy that they literally have to schedule me to come to their home, or they come to my gym or studio rather, and they exercise, because if they didn't have, we're talking about accountability again, they didn't have a meeting with me set up, it would never happen. And if they didn't know that, hey, I'm going to charge you a lot of money if you don't show me, you're going to be charged a lot of money. So you better show up, and that's how I have a job. But it's also the science is so prevalent of how reduction of stress and exercise influence behavior, emotional well-being, mental health, all of these positive things. And in this world, it is so easy for us to go to the doctor to get a pill, or to work on the treatment rather than the prevention. We want to work on the prevention. And so taking the time to take a walk, take a jog, go on a bicycle ride, go hike a mountain or a hill or just an overpass, do some things that are going to help lift you and get the heart rate up to increase blood circulation, blood flow, that brings vital nutrients literally to your body. And, I think the soul is the body and the spirit combined, right? And we have to nurture both. And I think we become very lazy stewards of our physical bodies when we do not exercise them and actually engage in physical exercise. You know, our bodies are designed to move. Taking self-care seriously, watching what you eat and the portions that you eat and those kind of things. I mean, there's so many things out there. I recently read a book called "It Can't Hurt Me." It's got by a guy named David Goggins, and the David Goggins book, it's so good. And he's a man of faith, but he's an inner city guy who's been a career sailor. So you can imagine some of this harsh language, but the life lessons are really quite good. And this guy is a super athlete and a super crazy person. They call him the world's hardest man because he was a Navy SEAL for 20 years. And this guy does, 200-mile runs and these, very grueling endurance events. And he's very competitive, does very well. At one point in time, he held the world record for pull-ups, 5,000 pull-ups or something in a 24-hour period. It's kind of a self-help book, but it's not the self-help book that you might think. And he comes from a very impoverished background, a very hard background. He was an inner city kid growing up. He was the only African-American kid in his world. He got bullied. He got called all these names. He was overweight. He was, all these, kind of cards stacked against him in that regard. But he came to a point where he had to really kind of look himself in the mirror and say, who am I going to be? And I have control over this. And I think sometimes in our world, it's easy to shift control and say, you know what? Well, I'm a victim of my circumstance, or this is happening to me, or, I'm divorced, or my spouse did this, or my son did this, or my dad was abusive to me. I had this physical challenge. I got this accident. I have this illness. I have this, that, and the other, and on it goes, right? And he kind of takes this tough love approach, so what? You got to look in the mirror every day and at yourself and say, am I the best person I can be? He was 20 years old or 21 years old, and he was kind of an exterminator. He was going around, he's 300 pounds overweight, and he'd go to take the night shift and spray for cockroaches and stuff in the fast food joints. And he realized, he's like, that's not who I want to be. And so that book for me was, that's one I read recently that I thought, yeah, that's a different approach of that tough love. But I think that's so true. And in my world, when I work with people, especially those that live in a very technologically advanced world where we're deconditioned, meaning we're out of shape, essentially.
Yes.
That we are not used to being pushed hard physically. And when we get pushed hard physically, our mental side, that's where really the work has to be done. And there's something called the 40% rule, where they've actually studied this, that your mind can override that you think, I'm at my physical limit. You've done about 40%. You have another 60% effort you can give.
Really?
And so when you're doing these hard efforts, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and run, a marathon or an Ironman or triathlon or go running or whatever. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying make yourself hurt a little bit, in a good way, obviously, see where your breaking point is, and then get to that and then go a little bit beyond that. But sometimes we need to be pushed outside that comfort zone, and that physical comfort zone of our bodies, it is so connected to our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health. And I think because we are so, again, deconditioned just in society, because our life is so easy, just generally speaking, we get used to having things when we want, where everything's comfortable, everything is, and I remember many times in just kind of my rehabilitation process, kind of pushing myself and hurting and feeling and I don't mean doing damage. That's not what I'm talking about, but I'm just saying, because I was this accomplished endurance athlete, and then, if I don't do anything for 4 months, well, that's really hard. And you have to come back, and the workouts are very difficult that normally would be very, very easy, but pushing yourself a little bit. So I think for me, that was helpful because it made me think, and it made me focus, and just being a little bit more present in kind of my, okay, what am I feeling right now? Am I hurting? Am I just uncomfortable? Am I, and just being a little more present. And I think that that's something that we don't do enough in our very cushy world. So that's a big thing. It's just that, on the one side, it's the self-care of getting enough rest, taking time outside your day to meditate, pray, get a massage every once in a while, do some yoga, do something that's going to just allow your mind to be calm and just not be so ratcheted up. And then the other side of the house is pushing yourself a little bit. It's doing something that's hard. Maybe if you've never run before, maybe it's jogging for a little bit. The next time you're on the walk, and as opposed to just walk, you run for 30 seconds, and then you walk, and then run for another 30 seconds, and then walk, or whatever that is. And then it could be going and taking a class at the gym that seems intimidating to you, but whatever that is. So that physical side is so helpful, especially with people that then start to see physical change, and then their self-esteem improves. They accomplish a small goal, and now, well, how can that carry over into my other aspects of my life?
Oh,
that's one
and
of the most beautiful things that I see. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, those are some things I think are resources or avenues you can go down to help kind of get you outside that comfort zone.
Thank you so much. So let me ask you this. I know that there's going to be people out there who have just really resonated with you and your message. What is the best way for them to connect with you or to find your business online? How can they do that?
I have a personal Facebook page. People are welcome to reach out to me there, but I have a business Facebook page and a website. The name is TriFit Evolution. So TRIFIT evolution.com. And that's, you can reach out to me there, and that kind of gives a little bit of background professionally, what I do and so forth. But yeah, people can reach out on Facebook too. So yeah. Or awesome. Instagram. I'm on Instagram as well. So
good. And we'll put all those links to that and the amazing books that you've shared. We'll put all of those resources in the show notes so that people can find it and click the button. What are we talking about? Being it'd be easy. Click that button and change your life.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If it was only that easy, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, Alan, this has been just such a joy to talk to you and reconnect again. But thank you also for sharing lessons learned in your hard times and just the wisdom of setting some big goals for yourself and reaching for those goals and how to make that achievable in bite-sized pieces. This has just been so amazing. So thank you for inspiring us that trials can help us build back stronger and we can achieve anything. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's show. I know that there are many of you out there that are going through a hard time, and I hope you found things that have been useful today as you listen to the podcast. If you would like to access the show notes from today's podcast, visit my website. It is storiesofhopepodcast.com. That is where you'll find favorite quotes from today's episode and shareable memes. And those are fun because you can share them with your friends on social media. You will also find the links mentioned throughout today's episode so you don't have to remember what those were. And also all the tips that were shared. Sometimes tips are shared so much throughout an episode you forget. What were those great things? So go to the show notes, storiesofhopepodcast.com, to look up these fantastic resources. If someone kept coming to mind during today's episode, perhaps that means that you should share this with them. Maybe there was a story shared or a tip that they really, really need to hear. So go ahead and share this episode with them. May God bless you, especially if you are struggling, with hope to carry on and with the strength to keep going when things get tough. Remember to walk with Christ, and He will help bear that burden. Above all else, remember, God loves you.